My name is Era, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. I'm your host, Era. Today I have Pirasaanth Varatharajan. Hopefully I got that right. And he's a CPA, CA turned real estate private equity founder. And after building his foundation at PwC and becoming a partner at Galleon CPA, he co-founded Foundation Capital to focus on multifamily real estate investing and asset management. So by blending on a disciplined tax strategy and entrepreneurial risk-taking, he sits at the intersection of structured finance and bold capital allocation and helping investors thinking about how to build wealth beyond kind of the traditional path. So Pirasaanth or Para or V, however you want to go today. Thanks for kind of jumping on the podcast, and yeah, excited to share your story.
For sure. Thanks for having me, Ara. That was quite the introduction there. Yeah, as you mentioned, my name is Pirasaanth, but I go by PV mostly online. So, yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, I like to kind of start at the beginning. Where you are today, obviously, is a series of events and decisions and things you've experienced. So, like, what was your childhood like in terms of your, as a kid, as growing up in your formative teenage years? What was
Mhm.
that like, and how do you think that impacted like where you are today?
Yeah, I think so. To back up down memory lane a little bit, when my parents first moved to the country, I was fortunate enough to be born here, but we grew up in the Jane Finch area, which, as you know, has a reputation for being a little rough and not the most ideal place to grow up. But I actually really enjoyed my upbringing there. It gave me an element of, I want to say, for lack of a better word, street smarts growing up. You really learn the importance of being educated, but also being functional and learning how things really work. So during my formative years, I feel I had a lot of experiences that were taught to me from that environment. My parents, of course, didn't really earn a lot of money. My dad was raising a family of four boys off of a factory employee salary. So money was always tight. And because of that, that really, I think, is what sparked my initial interest in how do I change this circumstance? I want to be wealthy one day. I don't want to have to be told no to playing hockey and some of these other types of activities that I wanted to do. So from a young age, it gave me the mindset of how do I earn more money? So even as a kid, we started hustling, trading Pokemon cards, trying to flip things and sell. So I think that's where my early entrepreneurial roots first came to play. But over the years, as I grew and seeing how my parents and immediate family were struggling, they always stressed an importance on becoming educated and using an education to get a higher income job. So that was always my focus for the first part of my life. I thought the game was go to school, get a good degree. From that degree, get a job that pays you well, and your life will be set. But as we move on to the next chapters, I really discovered that that wasn't the case.
Yeah, I think a lot of Tamil families, first generation, I guess that moved here, typically moved to like the areas like Jane Finch, Melbourne, where I grew up. And usually it is single income, because especially like you had four, like your family had four kids, so did mine. So
Mhm.
usually like my dad was working, again, low income job. Mom was staying at home, obviously, like with four kids. That's like a full-time job there. So a lot of commonalities there. I guess in terms of uh, you talked about you thought the game was played a certain way, and then like what sparked that change where you kind of realized, hey, the game you were playing isn't going to ultimately make you happy or like allow you to live the life that you want to live.
Yeah, for sure. So funny enough, that transpired during my time at PwC. So I was following that traditional path, go to school, get that degree, and then you fight tooth and nail to get into one of these firms. It's very competitive to do so. I actually would graduated slash was trying to find co-op in the post 2008, 2009 financial crisis. So the amount of openings were very low and competition was at all-time highs for these positions. So I had to fight tooth and nail to get in there finally and thinking, okay, I've made it. I'm in PwC. I'm going to become a CPA and life's going to be set. And you quickly realize that just working a corporate job like this and trading your time for money is a game which has a ceiling on it. I remember working like 80, 90-hour weeks as an auditor and doing the math on whether my salary worked out to minimum wage, and it was well below it. And that made me essentially question, how can I really build wealth? There's got to be a better way than this. Am I really going to just climb this ladder, become a partner one day at 40? Then, okay, you might be making a couple hundred grand, be making some decent money, but am I really going to be in this trap until then? And that kind of school of thought is what got me to look into other ways to build wealth. And real estate was one of the first ones that jumped out at me.
And so when you kind of started your real estate journey, was it the typical trying to buy property, kind of be a landlord, or like what was your first kind of foray or entrance into real estate and investing in that world?
Yeah, so I got introduced to this individual who was a family friend of a friend of mine. And it was a Tamil gentleman as well. And he, in my eyes, was very successful in the sense that he initially was an engineer back in Sri Lanka, came here, redid his engineering certifications and schooling, and he was practicing as an engineer here. Similarly, realized that, being an engineer doesn't pay as well as he thought. So he transitioned into being a realtor and a real estate investor. So for him, he's a lot older than me. He had the opportunity to buy a lot of pre-construction condos, scale that portfolio up for himself, and was sitting on a lot of equity. So he introduced me to the concept of just buying a pre-construction condo, investing in it, forget about it for 20, 30 years, and one day that thing's going to be worth a lot more than what you paid for. Have a long-term horizon on it, and you can build wealth that way. So that's a funny story because initially, as I was saving up for through co-op and all throughout school and in my early grad years, I was planning on buying a car, like a lot of young gentlemen my age. I wanted a nice BMW, and fortunately, speaking with this gentleman who was very successful and had potentially the life that I wanted, he told me buying a car could be one of the stupidest things that you could do, especially at this age. Invested in real estate, and down the road, when your assets grow in value, you can use that equity and that capital to enjoy some of the luxuries in life.
Got it. And so, got it. So how did you go from that to kind of you know, uh, the evolution, or I guess where you're at today, where, you think you were buying real estate and I guess you invested in real estate. Um, I guess what was the outcome of kind of the first couple of investments you made in real estate? And then how
Yeah.
did you get that leap of logic where you're like, hey, it's probably the logic I saw as well personally, like kind of exploring real estate investing, where you're now kind of focused on multifamily and why you're such a big advocate and like bull on that particular kind of segment of the
Mhm.
market.
Yeah, great question, Ara. So, to add on to that story, I did purchase a pre-construction investment. That was my very first one. And while I was waiting the 4 years for that construction to complete, that was my first dive into real estate. So from there, just networking with friends, family, people that were a lot more successful than me, I was trying to find a way to scale up faster. And through that, one of my current partners, Mitt, he found himself in a very interesting situation where he was an auditor like myself at PwC, left the firm, audited an external client out in London, Ontario, and the controller that he was working with there was a gentleman who was about 30 years old at the time. I believe we were both around like 24-ish, and he did an interim audit with that gentleman, left. 6 months pass, goes back, and they finds out that the guy left because he retired. And Mitt was kind of like, "What do you mean he retired? He's 30 years old. I don't understand." Reached out to him directly. They met up for coffee, and he said, "Hey, I retired because, I was making approximately 125,000 in this controller job. I have like 12 rental properties in London, Ontario. The cash flow from these things annually is 125,000 for me, so I can just retire and not need to work." So that story kind of like blew our mind and got us thinking, this guy retired at 30 off of just rental properties, completely passive. He's making the same amount of income. What's going on here? So that opened up a whole new world for us of what we call the technical investing, or what is known as the BRRRR strategy, where you buy a property, you renovate it, you rent it, you refinance it, and then you repeat the process. So this is something where you can actively deploy the strategy and force the value of the property up versus what I had done prior to that was just buy that pre-construction condo, speculate on appreciation happening, and I was going to just plan on holding it for the long term. So while I was waiting for that to complete, I started saving up more capital to essentially execute on one of these style of projects that Matt from London had exposed us to. So that was where we first opened up the world into more technical investing and the Burr strategy.
And Matt is one of the partners, I guess, as well at Foundation, right?
He used to be. Yeah, he was one of the I guess founding partners, and then a couple years ago he decided to go on to a different venture. So he's no longer with Foundation Capital, but he did have an impact on our early real estate journey and kind of introducing us to this world.
So in terms of like, I guess once you guys met Matt, you guys kind of got your eyes open, you saw this new opportunity. That was, you talked about cash flowing properties. That was like maybe single family properties, or was it like multifamily as well?
Yeah, so it could be anywhere between single family to duplexes or triplexes. The ones that we ended up executing on were duplex or triplex at least. We didn't do too many single families just because the cash flow was better from the multiple units.
And so how did you graduate from that to like now these bigger properties you're buying? Like, did you, as you kind of stepped up or like went, progressed up the real estate ladder, did you ever kind of cash out of earlier investments and kind of double down on kind of where you were at currently with like the bigger multifamily projects just because you saw the value there versus still keeping capital tied up in your old investments? Like, how did you think about that?
Yeah, so when we first started, the goal was just collect as many properties as possible, grow the portfolio as big as possible, and just collect the cash flow. Because until you go through it, you don't realize how much operational headaches and things like that come from owning so many doors at different locations. So, myself, Mitt, and Jeff, who are the three partners in Foundation Capital, we're each scaling up our own individual portfolios, doing the burst strategies, joint venturing with each other on certain ones, etc. And very quickly, we realized with multifamily apartment buildings, the fundamentals for how this type of real estate works is very much the same. You're just doing it at a bigger scale. Yes, there's other nuances involved, but even operationally, sometimes the management can be easier because you have 10 units under one roof instead of 10 individual properties spread out. So we were saying it's, the amount of effort and focus doesn't seem to be that much more versus what we're currently doing. Why don't we just start going bigger, leveraging up and buy apartment buildings? Again, the fundamentals are the same. This is something that we should look into. And then the other really attractive thing with the apartment buildings, which is a key difference with this type of real estate versus your regular single family homes or duplexes or triplexes, is they're considered, even though they're residential in nature, they're considered commercial real estate. Therefore, they're valued based on the net operating income. The higher you can push that net operating income, the higher you can push the value of the asset. And then that works really well for the burst strategy because you force appreciation, you force equity, you refinance the asset, pull out that capital, and now you can use it to purchase another piece of real estate and continue scaling your portfolio. So, business model, very simple in nature. It's not rocket science by any means. It's very boring and simple to follow, simple math. Problem is the execution is difficult, and going through that process helps you develop the expertise needed and the nuances that are around executing on a strategy like this.
There's a difference between simple and easy. We kind of highlighted principles. There's some principles that are simple to kind of understand, but not easy to execute.
Mhm.
Easy is different from simple. So I completely agree with you. Like execution is most of it. In terms of like Burr and just kind of this general strategy of kind of obviously forced appreciation, pulling out capital and kind of, trying to be in deals with almost no money in. Especially in climates like this where like the world kind of can suddenly turn, interest rates kind of change. Um, does that the fear of over leveraging ever kind of pop to mind, or do you guys model very conservatively? Because I mean, obviously, I see a lot of different things in the industry where like you see operators or competitors of yours, running into trouble where like they can't do distributions anymore, like they have to be, they can't allow anybody to kind of cash out because, they're very low on liquidity. How do you guys prevent yourselves from falling into the same trap? And like, how do you guys structure your deals and distributions to clients to kind of, yeah, prevent this?
Yeah, great question, Nara. I think where it really first starts with is
This episode is sponsored by nobody. That's right, nobody. So if you could be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me.
discipline, especially in underwriting. Like myself and Mitt, we're both CPAs. Our partner Jeff is more the operations slash deals acquisition value add to the team as well. So when we underwrite deals, we're very diligent in does it meet our criteria or not. We have buffers in there for if renovations are going to go longer, take more time. Interest rates fluctuations weren't something that we typically needed to consider as we were acquiring deals because ultimately our exit was with CMHC. But I think the real answer to your question, Ara, especially when you look at our competitors or a lot of people who over leveraged themselves when the market was hot and when interest rates went up, kind of the curtain was pulled back on, was that they didn't have a firm exit went their real estate deals. Like a lot of people's essential plan was to acquire this asset, hold on to it, and it's just the market will naturally just keep appreciating in value. Also, we're seeing this in multifamily too, where people just capital was so easy to access. They're raising capital, no problem. They'd rather take the capital and deploy it into things just to place the capital for the sake of it rather than putting it into a deal where they have the potential to force up the value and then exit the deal. So for us, all of the deals that we did, we only did deals where we could do a value add strategy. The NOI was low. We had the potential to push it up significantly higher, refinance with CMHC, and then get our exit. And with that financing, it cash flows, right? So I think buying assets where we have that exit plan in nature versus just purely waiting on market appreciation and hoping and praying for speculation is a big difference maker. And also just being diligent in the type of deals which we're deploying capital into.
So for people that are listening that don't know what CMHC is, maybe explain what that is and like why that's an exit strategy for you.
Yeah, so CMHC essentially stands for the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. It's a government-backed entity which lends on multifamily properties such as ours, and it exists to essentially provide better financing to the types of properties which the government is looking to push and has mandates to fulfill. So, for example, we are in a housing shortage, so the government wants more housing put out there. Therefore, CMHC will lend on apartment buildings such as ours, where we're repurposing them, we're renovating them, we're improving them to allow for that inventory to come to the market. Separately, they also have a program for the building of purpose-built apartment buildings, which Foundation Capital is now also doing through our development fund, which we can touch on later. But to answer your question, Ara, it's essentially a government-backed entity which provides more attractive financing terms to allow people like us to do what we do to help the government fulfill a mandate.
And you're in the business of money and kind of capital allocation. And like it's a obviously it's a very attractive business, but it comes with not headaches, but like transparency and kind of communication because there's a lot of operators out there that probably don't do the best job of it. Like, how do you guys ensure that this investment vehicle or vehicles that you guys have isn't just like a black box where somebody gives you the money and then they kind of don't know what's happening? Like, how do you keep people in the loop? Like, like, what's your strategy around that to kind of
Yeah,
trust and create that sense of transparency?
for sure. I think one thing that we've done from the ground up since inception has been showing transparency through our social media. Your traditional, let's call it Wall Street or institute or bigger institutions are used to their traditional investor relations reporting, where it's just financial statements, annual reports, management discussion and analysis type things, where we quickly realized our investors like to actually see the boots on the ground and the nitty-gritty of the operation sometimes. And they want to feel like they own the real estate, but don't have to deal with the headaches. Like oftentimes we would go on social media and post some of the crazy stories that would come out of these units where, problem tenants are causing things. There might be a shootout or something, depending on the area. So it's just sharing those stories, showing how we're dealing with problems and how we're keeping the portfolio chugging along. Uh, you would think is wasn't interesting to people, but they really want to know it and have that. It makes them feel like they own the property without having to deal with the headaches and te toilets and tenants. So that's an approach that's really helped us. We've also been doing live streams and investor check-ins and things like that to just keep people more informed and just make them feel like, hey, you own this portfolio.
So you kind of talked about your story, kind of how you navigated your career path. if there's like high earners today that are obviously making good money, what would be your personal recommendation to them? Like, would it be to buy property or invest in businesses, or like, what would be your advice to them?
Mhm.
People always talk about passive income, real estate, or just businesses, even if you buy them. But as an operator myself, like, there's no such thing as passive, really.
Mhm.
Like an illusion. But like, so I'm curious, based on that, like, what your advice would be to these people.
Yeah, I think the question would really come down to what their goal is with their career or their business. Like, for example, I want to say the majority of my investor base are individuals who are high income earners, or they already have an active business that's doing great. So, they can invest with us, or they can go ahead and invest in apartment buildings themselves. If they were to do it themselves, for sure, it's going to be more money in their pocket and it's going to be a more lucrative investment overall. The problem is it's like a second full-time job or like a second full-time business. So then it ends up hurting your high income career or your earning business and taking away time. So the question really comes down to, are you looking to transition to becoming a multifamily investor full time, or making this your main thing, which is what me and Mitt ended up doing ultimately, which is why we're in this business. But if your true passion or if your true goal is to continue scaling up your career or your existing business, I would say it's a better option to look at a passive vehicle such as ours. Same question goes for private equity or acquiring a business. If your goal is to eventually run that business full time and have it be your main thing, then going down that route can be very lucrative. Otherwise, it makes more sense for you to have a vehicle or someone partner with someone where they're managing it for you.
And based on kind of how you progress as well, I'm curious because everyone kind of makes mistakes or learning lessons kind of along the way.
Mm.
Um, what were some financial mistakes that you made when you were younger, even now, that might have cost you short term, but in the long term, they either protected you or like they benefited you somehow?
Yeah, I think especially when I was younger and kind of coming up, I very much had an invest mindset, like save as much as you can, live below your means and invest and build these nest eggs. So down the road in the future, you're going to be in a much better position. So, but as a result of that, I had the tendency to save and then go all in on different types of investments. And if it doesn't work out, instead of having diversified, you're kind of you've lost all your money type of thing. So I had a couple instances with that where, I would save a lot. I started investing in real estate. I had that pre-construction, which paid off well, and I had a decent amount of capital to allocate. So I started trying a bunch of different strategies like Airbnb arbitrage, flipping. We did single family rentals in Cleveland. I was a really early, I wouldn't say really early, but a semi-early investor in Bitcoin and crypto, and I had put a lot of capital in there. And when things didn't work out, if I had diversified better or if I had put more capital to more steady, safe things versus chasing, I guess, moon rockets, I would have been in a better position. So, for example, the crypto one. I was on the right side of the trade. I was willing to hold it for the long term, but unfortunately, I'd invested in one of the exchanges, Quadriga, which ended up going
Uh,
under. So that was a lesson learned on having your crypto on your own private keys and private wallet, etc. So and yeah, I put a good chunk of my money there because I believed in the investment long term. But these learning lessons kind of teach you to be more cautious, how to better diversify your portfolio and not just look at the upside. I think the real way to summarize it is I was consistently looking at the upside, but not focusing on what the downside could be. Which, with that perspective now, when deals come across my desk or people ask me to invest in private equity projects or startups and things like that, they're very quick to sell you what the upside is going to be. But because of my experience now, I know how to look at the downside and whether this is a risk that I can even stomach at this current time.
so as you kind of progress throughout your journey, I'm sure like your days look different. Like, when you're working for somebody, your days are a bit more locked in, structured, and now you're an entrepreneur and you're kind of maybe your days are a little less structured, but in a good way.
Mhm.
Why are you doing all this? Like, what is the life you're hoping to kind of live by, building this real estate like empire or like this, investment vehicle for people like, the average person. Like, why are you doing this? What are you hoping the outcome is for you in the future as well?
Yeah, when I first started in this journey, Ara, it was all about financial freedom, of course. And then after a certain point, once you, I guess, can hit that financial freedom goal, depending on what it looks like for you, et cetera, the big piece of it for me was having time freedom, right? Like even when I was at PwC, I thought about making the transition to an investment banker instead because they make a lot more money and but the hours were also worse. And on the flip end, I kind of realized I'd be happy with less money, but I have more control over my time. So that was what initially really drove me. Like I wanted to be in a business where I didn't, once the business is established and it's kind of running on its own, doesn't require too much of my time, and I can still live financially how I want to. Uh, but once I pass those goals, I think there's like a mental stimulation aspect to it as well, where when we first got into this, we were chasing the concept of FIRE, financial independence, retire early. And once we hit that point, we were like, okay, we don't want to retire. We want to keep growing. We want to see how big we can make this thing, what we can achieve, and stimulating for the mind. So I think that's what keeps me going.
Because I always hear about people, they talk about like winning the lottery or like hitting some kind of big financial milestone and being happy and kind of maybe like relaxing and doing nothing all day or just kind of having a very easygoing life. But there's something definitely there to kind of the cadence between work and play. But to your point, like stimulation or like having purpose, I feel like at some point those things will get boring and you need something kind of to challenge you or like make you kind of think outside yourself or just yeah, just something to keep you going. So I was just curious, like if you if you experience that particular phase of like, hey, I've hit my goals, I've you kind of lived it a little bit, and then did you hit that like boredom part or like lack of mental stimulation or like do you think that's something eventually you'll crave or want?
Yeah, for sure. And another interesting thing is, you're hearing young guys like us discussing it, but even just talking to older entrepreneurs, they're in much better financial positions, and you would think like they're actually at the age of retiring. And how come you're still working on this business or growing it? I run into a lot that are growing it, and their kids don't even want to take it over, and they're still putting in their effort. I'm like, what's the point? You're financially set for the rest of your life. They really lean on stimulation, mentally stimulating, and just it being their purpose. So I think that feeling doesn't go away the older you get.
You kind of talked about a couple of things. Like I talked about foundation capital and the investment vehicle of kind of investing and getting kind of both a combination of some kind of dividend or distribution as well as capital appreciation. And then you kind of talked about this other project that you have going on, which is more into development. So maybe talk about both aspects and I guess what kind of people could benefit from either type.
Yeah, for sure. So, our initial platform that we launched was Foundation Capital Private Real Estate Trust, which is a private REIT buying apartment buildings and executing on a value add strategy across Southwestern Ontario. That one has a 15% targeted annual return, which consists of two components. There's a 7% annualized cash flow distribution, which is paid to you on a monthly basis. And then we target at least 8% in appreciation in the value of your units. So when we say units in this context, think of it as like shares, but the Ontario Securities Commission just doesn't allow us to call them shares. I just want to clarify that because the apartment buildings themselves have individual units, which are the actual doors, and then you have your units, which essentially are like shares. So that's a total targeted return of 15%, and it's great for any investors who want access to apartment buildings as an asset class and don't want to have to deal with any of the management involved, but also are looking for a dual strategy where you get that cash flow and you also get that appreciation.
Did you know that every time you left a 5 out of 5 review for this podcast, a Tamil parent lets their child pursue a career in the creative arts? Okay, that's probably not true, but if there's a chance that it is, do you really want to jinx it? Leave a review. Do it for the young creative in you.
Then now we've launched Foundation Capital Development Fund 1, which is a development fund that will be building purpose-built rentals with our flagship project being in London, Ontario. This one is different and it's a unique opportunity because, most people are used to being able to buy a condo as an end user and be the end purchaser of a development, and then you're hoping that that price then goes up and you sell it in the market for more while you hold it as a rental. This is an option. This is an opportunity for you to profit like a developer by investing in the development. So you don't have to worry about whether end users are going to be purchasing this. This is going to be a fully rental apartment building, which we have actually our private REIT as a buyer to purchase at the end of the development, or we would sell it on the open market to another institution if the demand is there. Well, the demand is there, but for a higher price.
So like you've done this thing well with the first part, which is kind of that investment fund, buying up existing buildings, kind of executing your strategy. Do you ever feel like, or did you ever feel like when you're taking on this new project that, there might be that silver, the shiny object kind of syndrome, which is like, you're doing well. It's kind of not getting boring, but it's like you're doing well. Did you ever feel like there's a risk in kind of going on this other path of development? Because from my understanding, and you can kind of educate me as well, development kind of requires a different kind of skill set in terms of, instead of buying something already there, who's already done all the permits, all the execution, this is like you're building it from the ground up of like acquiring land and building property. Was that the presence of that risk kind of something that made you guys second guess the opportunity?
Yeah, for sure. I think want to take a step back. What really pushed us to go for this opportunity is with our current portfolio and the demographic that we service, which is the core workforce housing, the people that make between 50 to 75K a year in income. We very much are very in-depth expertise with that tenant profile and have a pulse on that market. And we very much recognize that there's a housing shortage serving that demographic. I'm sure you've seen the headlines where luxury condos are sitting vacant or rents have dropped. But if you really dig deep into those numbers for that core workforce housing demographic that we serve, the rents have remained stable, especially in our market, Southwestern Ontario. Based on that, it really is a testament to the demand there is for workforce housing, and the government is pushing developers like ourselves to build purpose-built apartment buildings to service this market. So there's very much a need for this housing, and of course, for the developers who do so, it can be very rewarding. Now, to answer your question, in terms of the risk and shiny object syndrome, we didn't really feel shiny object syndrome here because this was a natural transition to servicing this market. Again, with Foundation Capital Private Real Estate Trust, what we're doing is we're taking existing old outdated apartment buildings, bringing them up to their best use. So that contributes to the housing shortage by, revitalizing old inventory and making it new, which is one thing. But if you really want to make an impact and contribute to this housing shortage, development is the way to go, where you're bringing on completely brand new units into the marketplace. So to better service that niche, it is a very necessary transition. Now, in terms of development risk itself, for sure, inherently, there's more risk with development. There's more things that can go wrong, etc. But we've addressed this risk by partnering with the right people to help bring this project to life. So, we have Foundation Capital, who is responsible for raising the capital and deploying, also doing due diligence on costing and everything of that nature. But we have development manager in place, construction manager in place, who are very well experienced with the build side of things. So bringing those forces together, we feel like we've really mitigated our risk. And of course, we're buffering for overruns and delays and things like that as well. Even with those in place, the numbers work really great for this project. So we've done what we can to mitigate that risk.
I forgot. I don't know if there's a formal name for this ratio, but in Ontario specifically, I think if you take like the purchase, like if you look at basically the cost of renting versus buying, there's like a certain ratio, and I think the number has gone up the wrong way for like buying versus renting. So given that like it's way cheaper to rent versus buy, um, why hasn't there been like, I know you're saying the government's making a push to like folks like yourself to build more units, but it seems like it's very slow still. Like
Mhm.
the demand is way more than like the inventory available. So why do you think that it hasn't been like there hasn't been like a real fire lit under by the government kind of pushing or incentivizing? Because it seems like there's still red tape. They're still not kind of doing enough to get people to build those the rental apartment buildings like you talked about.
Yeah, for sure. I think for a lot of the traditional developers, they've always done end user products like condos, like homes, which are much more lucrative and they have their exit in place by selling to the end user versus those developers typically haven't wanted to be landlords at the end of it. Like, let's say I was building a condo and I'm building it the exact same way, but I'm going to keep it as a rental, which by force, some developers had to do given the current market conditions. They don't want to be landlords and have to be responsible for managing and operating a rental. So I think that appetite hasn't been there. But just now, with the CMHC incentives in place and government grants that certain municipalities are offering, they're slowly being incentivized in order to do it. For someone like us who naturally is already in the rental space, and like I said, this is a very natural transition for us to contribute to the housing shortage. I think it looks very lucrative for us, and I think the government can be doing more to push for the development. Like, for example, what we're doing, or even doing it in Toronto, would be a lot more difficult. There'd be some more red tape. Construction costs would look very different versus doing it in London, 2.5 hours away. The city is very cooperative with us. They have a bus rapid transit program that's being put in place on certain major arteries, which is where we're developing. So a lot of these incentives make them very cooperative with us in order to build. But to answer your question, I think the government could be doing more to make it easier and more incentivized for developers to build purpose-built rental housing.
And so for you, like being part of the Tamil community, I guess number one, like I guess growing up and even now, like how connected do you feel out of curiosity?
Yeah, it's interesting. I do feel pretty connected. I wasn't as connected as I want to say as your average person in the town community, but I do know a lot of great people in the community. I think where traditionally, like my business and my clients, it's been a very multicultural client base versus, a lot. I know a lot of Tamil entrepreneurs coming up initially build within their own community and then grow it up. So I think that's where I've kind of differed and. It's not that I stayed away from the community or anything like that. It's just naturally I did have a more multicultural and broader client base growing up and just building my business. So to answer your question, I do feel connected to the community though.
And in terms of the community, how do you think, what's like a wealth building myth in the community that you think needs to be challenged in terms of how we invest, how we buy, things like that?
Yeah, I think there's two things that really jump out to me is one is that being afraid of debt. Like, you have bad debt and you have good debt, or let's call good debt leverage. Even growing up, my parents were always teaching me that debt is bad. You don't want to be borrowing money from anybody, or you don't ever want to be in debt. The minute you get into debt, pay it off type of deal. But, you know, good debt or leverage where you can use it to exponentially multiply your return or how you're able to scale a business is a very powerful tool. And even the way I built my wealth was using leverage and the right type of tools. Again, having an exit strategy in place and executing on good deals. But if my plan was to always just save up cash each time to then make an investment, have it grow, and then redeploy a new one, it'd be a much slower path. That being said, for some people, slow and steady is the way to go, including myself with how we've scaled our portfolio. I would say, we're very diligent in how we've done it, and you're not aggressively trying to over leverage and scale. So it is a fine balance, but the myth I would say is learn to understand debt and leverage and how you can use it to safely scale anything you do. Like another example, or I can quickly give to people of the audience is when me and Mitt built our accounting firm, we built it from the ground up. Snowball effect in terms of getting clients, they send referrals, and it's a slow, steady build. Having gone through it and now understanding that game, what I would do if I had to do it all over again was I would buy a practice. Like you can go use the BDC, save up a down payment, purchase a practice. If BDC is not an option, you can get the existing practitioner to hold a VTB and essentially lend you the capital to close the transaction, and you pay them back over years using the net cash flow from the business you just inherited. And that's a much faster way to scale the practice versus building it from the ground up. So, and things like that. That's a perfect example of how leverage can help you scale faster than if you were to just grind your way up one by one.
So for you personally, investing, like you don't have to give numbers, is more so you're like obviously fully into real estate. Like, so is all your capital into real estate, or do you do things like buy businesses? Do you invest in crypto or all other kinds of investments like the S&P 500? Like, how do you actually look at that?
Primarily, it is real estate. I do also invest in the S&P 500 and individual stocks. I do a little bit of crypto, but just purely Bitcoin and just hold down to it for the long term type of thing. And I guess just business experience to learn that the meme coins and the other stuff is all just penny stocks in nature. So it's gambling essentially. So I stay clear from that. But my primary investments, I like real estate because we can control it to a certain extent, right? Again, we improve the income and we can improve the value of the asset versus anything that I would have to buy and hold and wait for speculation.
So if you were to kind of go back in a time machine and talk to, 16-year-old PV, like what would you like tell him?
Work on sales skills at a much earlier age. I think, again, given my upbringing and taking the safe path out, I always opted for the job with a guaranteed paycheck over anything that was door to door or sales or commission based in nature. And, having been an accountant and also now a real estate fund manager and just all talking to all types of businesses, especially when I had the accounting firm dealing with different entrepreneurs, I realized like in some form or fashion, you do need to know how to sell. And selling doesn't necessarily mean the aggressive direct method that people just immediately think of. Sales is so broad. There's like indirect selling where it's essentially you just communicating the value that your product or service offers in a very elegant way or a way that's very digestible for your potential consumer. So I would tell 16-year-old PV to really work on that because it just flows into all areas of your life, whether it's communication, business, whether it's your personal life. In some sort of fashion, the way you communicate is a sale.
It's funny you say that because like that's something I wish I learned earlier on as well. Because life is about sales, right? Like you're always trying to convince somebody of something, whether it's get into a relationship, how to stay in the relationship, convince your kids, your friends. Like you're always selling somebody on something. So it's like such an underrated skill. And you're right. I don't think it's like actively look positively. Like if I were to look back, like I wish I did like those door to door sales, like that the knife, whatever, the knife salesman or whatever, because you learn so much by doing sales in terms of how to not take things personally when somebody says no. It's more of like, hey, if somebody says no, it's really no, they're telling you no because of this reason or this reason, and you come up with strategies of how to mitigate those reasons or like overcome it. Because you talked about like this concept of a job being guaranteed money or like looking for that when you were younger, but somebody else reframed it like more recently where it made sense, which is it's actually a big risk to work a job and have that as your only income because if you lose a job, which a lot of people are finding out, like that's it. Versus when you're in entrepreneurship, a lot of people, and I didn't realize I did this, I'm sure you do this as well. You're a risk mitigator by nature. Like you're trying to avoid risk. You're doing all the things you can so bad things don't happen. Versus so like you're the opposite of what people think you are. People think you're about taking risks. There's some element of that, but it's really how do I avoid getting sued? How do I avoid going out of business? Versus with the job, you don't think about that. You're like, hey, I got this job. I'll just do whatever the minimum work to kind of get paid. Typically, like a lot of people don't like, I don't think are aiming to like, progress in their career. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It's kind of something that was on my mind as well.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely, if I can go back in time, that'd be a big one. I'm glad I've learned to do it over the years and have worked on that skill. But starting it earlier, it just comes very naturally and less effort down the road.
Yeah, like you said, people think sales is like being that loud person or like a certain type of personality. I found the
Mhm.
best salespeople, even people that I've encountered, are not even loud. Like they're just very good listeners and they know how to ask questions. Like that's all sales is, right? You're basically trying to figure out. Like I don't like people that just sell to you without asking you like who you are, like what you care about. Like you're not going to sell somebody on investing in real estate who just wants passive cash flow versus somebody that wants something else. So you're going to find out like who they are, what they care about. Are they a good fit for what you're selling? Because you don't want people that are a bad fit for your product because they're going to become bad ambassadors of your product and say, "Hey, PV sold me something that wasn't a good fit for me," right? So,
More trouble
uh,
down the road.
and then in terms of, I guess, your personal legacy, like in a few sentences, like what would you say, or like how would you want to be described by your friends and family?
Ooh, that's a good question. Or I think
Money can be hard to come by, but here is a $100 opportunity for you. Join my free newsletter for free exclusive content and a free chance to win $100 when I hold special draws. Did I mention that it's free?
How I would want to be described by my friends and family is, I guess, like a perfect example of not trying to get rich quick and chasing the next hottest thing, finding one or two good strategies that really work and giving it your all and scaling those up and doing it for the long term. I think, especially in this day and age, when I'm doing in calls with potential investors and business owners, they have a bunch of opportunities presented in front of them. A lot of people are immediate to jump at what has the quickest, highest return that's going to come the fastest. But sometimes just being disciplined, taking something that's a little bit more safe and stable, and putting the time in and waiting those 5, 6 years is really what's going to move you further along versus the thing that you took that was supposed to turn around in 2 years might evaporate into zero. So I think that's something I preach, and it's been a testament to my success as well. So I think that's how I'd want to be remembered. And as someone that just shows the power of investing, delayed gratification, especially, I think that's a big part of who I am, and just someone that embodies those principles.
I think people, sorry, just to add to that, I think people underestimate the power of compound interest. I think most people just don't understand. I think they talked about like with Warren Buffett as an example. I think 95% of his wealth is like after the age of 65 or 70, some crazy number. And it's just because like that delayed gratification, just letting things like compound interest is not just money. Like I think it applies to skills, relationships, like your network, which I think a lot of people don't kind of fully realize as well.
I would just add on to that, Ara. It's interesting because, I'm very much a product of having sacrificed my 20s to enjoy the next decade. And, friends, family who didn't make that same trade, I try to tell them there's so much life ahead of you. You can start sacrificing now so that your 40s are going to be amazing or your 50s are going to be amazing. But the average person still thinks, the 10 years is so far away. Like I want it now versus okay, you know what? It's going to come faster than I think. Let me start making these sacrifices now to enjoy it. And next thing you know, the 10 years is going to fly by. So having that long-term mindset, people don't realize it's quicker than you think, and the efforts you put in now are going to have a huge impact. So it's never too late to start.
Yeah, there's a saying of people overestimate what they do in a year and underestimate what they do in a decade. It's that same principle.
Mhm.
Uh, I fully agree. And it applies to health as well. I think I got triggered by that when that thought got triggered by like viewing your health journey. Like I see you kind of been on this health journey and, being disciplined and all that. Because in my wife's business, she's a physiotherapist and like she sees a lot of older people. And you talk to them, a lot of the things they've experienced or are experiencing, obviously there's some things that are out of your control, but there are a lot of things like in their 30s and 40s that they didn't do. They kind of just slowly, like these small habits that kind of just add up. So compound interest is good, but it can also be bad. Where like
Mhm.
the life you want to live when you're 60 or 70 is like the decisions you make today. Just like you talk to your friends about, hey, skip out on that buying that car or like taking that vacation, put that to like real estate. In your 30s and 40s, they'll take vacations all the time. People, it's just human nature, I guess. Like people just can't do it. Like they have this experiment with children. I don't know if you've seen it. It's very famous. It's like with the marshmallow, I think, where like
Yeah.
you offer like you can kind of you offer the hey you can take one marshmallow now or if you wait you can get an extra one like in like 5 or 10 minutes and like the kids that have done really well are the ones that fell into the second bucket which is they decided to take the two and just wait the 5 or 10 minutes but for most kids who have no concept of time they're like hey I'll take the one now
Right,
so
right.
I fully agree with everything you said so just throwing that out there
Yeah.
but that's kind of a good segue into the final part of the podcast. It's a fun segment a speed round I like to call Creator Confessions. I'm going to basically say a bunch of statements, and you tell me, I guess, the first thing that pops to mind. Ready?
Let's do it.
Favorite Tamil food?
Same favorite Tamil food. I go with mutton rolls.
Classic. If there's like a fire or flood, and like you only have time to take two things with you, can't be people. Like what are they?
A fire or a flood? I think I would definitely grab like old photo book that I got from when I was a kid and stuff like that. I can't be replaced. I haven't digitized it. Otherwise, Yeah, I don't think there's anything I'd grab. Like, family dog recently passed away, so otherwise he would have been top of my list.
Something that scares you.
Something that scares me, I think getting complacent scares me. And I've been through phases in my life where that's happened, and that's where my health can kind of regress or my productivity, things like that. But I've actively put mechanisms in place to ensure that I stay motivated and just be disciplined and consistent.
Insecurity that you have.
Insecurity that I have. Uh, I think prior to me getting my fitness in check, I think definitely carrying some extra body weight was a little bit of an insecurity, but do you take the right action and it gets solved right away? Not right away, but over time.
Favorite show you're watching.
Favorite show that I'm watching. So I actually right now I'm just watching reruns of How I Met Your Mother. I think that's one of my all-time favorite shows. It's almost strategically done though, or like there are new great shows that come out, but I know if I start them at night, I'm not falling asleep on time. So I make sure I watch reruns so that I can kind of drift off.
Got it. A place you're itching to travel to.
A place that I'm interested to travel to. That's a good point. I think. Probably somewhere in Asia. I've been doing a Asia trip for the past few years, and I've crossed off most of the places I wanted to. Actually, you know what? I'll say Sri Lanka. I haven't been there in 8 years, and I'm seeing that they're calling it the new Bali in certain parts. So I want to go back and check that out.
I love Asia in general. Like I think the experiences there, like I just came back from the trip like recently as well. Um, what's something you like to do for fun outside of work?
I love Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so that's been a great hobby of mine. Been doing it for about 4 years now, so I love to do that.
A fellow Tamil creator you want to give a shout out to.
A fellow Tamil creator that I want to give a shout out to. You know what? I'll shout out my BJJ coach, actually, Zuka BJJ. I think he's one of the only two black belts in Canada, and he is a creator as well. So I'll shout him out. A smooth segue right there.
What's his name?
His name is Arthur Chandramohan. He'd actually be a great person for you to maybe speak with as well, because yeah, really good at what he does. I wouldn't say is I don't know. Think master is an appropriate word, but yeah, comes from a cool background and is very highly respected in the sport.
Favorite childhood memory.
Favorite childhood memory? I think just me hanging out with my brothers, doing some family stuff. I think like I have one where we all went to Center Island as kids and just had some fun. It was simpler time. You didn't need to spend a lot of money or anything like that, but just good memories.
Sorry, when you brought up just thinking about when you said simpler times. It's crazy how your dad, like my dad, single income, low income, was able to like take care of a family of six, and now
Mhm.
like that same income like barely covers like one person. Like, it's pretty
Yeah,
wild.
yeah, yeah. You can't even get a place. You barely afford your rent and then have cash left over.
Yeah. What's your favorite movie of all time?
For a while it was iRobot. I really liked iRobot. I'll go with iRobot. I haven't seen too many movies lately, but those just always hold a special place in the heart.
What's a decision you've been putting off for a while?
A decision I've been putting off for a while. Well, funny enough, we talked about this a little bit offline, but it was whether I moved back downtown or not. And I think after 4 years, I've gotten to the point where, okay, I've made a decision to do it again.
What do you feel behind on?
Um, to be honest, right now. For a while, Lara, I did feel like the growth of our fund was behind. That's just because of who myself and our partners are as individuals and in terms of being ambitious. But when we compare our life cycle to our competitors who've actually been, all of our competitors have been in the business for at least 10 years more than us. It's quick to focus on where they're at and where we're at, but that's helped me rejig my expectation and control what you can control, grow and the growth will come.
What's something that you were wrong about?
I've been wrong about a lot of things. Oh, I guess with investments there, there was a lot of instances where I made the wrong decision and lost money, like I was saying, over chasing different types of stocks, trading based on people's noise and market expectations versus fundamentals and holding for the long term. So I think plenty of investment decisions that I've been wrong about or entering the wrong partnerships, but they've all been expensive learning lessons that I wouldn't take back.
Love the reframe. What's a purchase you've made recently that you've splurged on, but you have no regret about?
Recently not too much, but there is a couple like nice watches and stuff that I bought in last year, which I don't part of the investor in me sometimes regrets it being like I could have, put this into the market and had it double or triple it over the next long-term horizon, but I do have no regrets for it by reframing it as something I enjoy and maybe a piece that I can pass on to my children one day.
What's a pet peeve of yours?
Pet peeve, tardiness. Tardiness is a pet peeve of mine.
If you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, a regret that you would have.
If I were to die tomorrow, a regret that I would have, um, I would say maybe not having spent as much time with friends recently as I would have liked to. I think, the business and I'm very much in this hyper growth phase of our business that doesn't allow for as much time. I think I do a pretty good job, but if I were to die tomorrow, it would kind of suck because I get through a lot of this telling myself that when things are slow, you'll have the time to spend with friends and invest in those relationships. But if it was taken away tomorrow, that would kind of suck.
Like a person, like it could be celebrity or just anybody whose life you'd want to experience for just one day.
I do 50 Cent. I think he was an idol of mine growing up as a kid, and just to see him transition not just from a rapper and artist, but into an actual businessman, that allure is still there, versus with the typical artists, you idolize them as a kid, and then they get out of the business, and then that fades. I think he's transitioned to things that I still am very interested in.
Got it. What's a book you've read or a podcast you've listened to that's had an impact on you?
I'd say the Diary of a CEO podcast. I've gotten a lot of value from tons of the episodes, a lot of different guests coming in, many of them that this is my first time hearing who they are. There's always at least one piece of value that you can gather from that podcast.
What's a belief, behavior, or habit that's improved your life?
The belief delayed gratification. That's a big one. I think that has completely changed the trajectory of my life.
And finally, what's a piece of advice you'd give to your fellow aspiring Tamil creators out there?
Yeah. To my fellow Tamil creators out there, piece of advice that I would give is don't don't get discouraged and don't quit. I think a lot of people out there already have a business in mind that they're working on or in the process of scaling up, and things are always going to go wrong or potentially set you back. It's over a long enough period of time. If you continue to just show up and make the small improvements needed, you'll make it. I think what I've seen with a lot of people is they quit too early, and that ends up being the downfall. So stay resilient and stay active.
Good advice, PV. Well, thank you for kind of jumping on this episode and kind of really sharing those nuggets of both wisdom, especially around investing in real estate. If somebody's listening to this and they're, inspired and want to reach out to you, what is the best way for them to connect?
Yeah, I would say Instagram is one of the best ones. My handle is at the PV Rajan, so ThePVRajan. You could also email me at Pira at foundationcapital.ca.
Perfect. Well, thanks again, PV, and to all the listeners listening, as usual, appreciate you guys taking the time to listen to each episode. On to the next episode.
Amazing. Thanks for having me, Ara.